Okay, so what we've got next is the plate depths. The plate depths are actually plating that would be attached onto your lintels. What is lintels? Lintels would be your diagonals or braces added on top of your openings. Okay, so should your opening windows or door openings span quite a distance, what would be used above those openings is called bracing or lintels or lattices, whatever the case might be. Now, when you start achieving a very large opening, what you might want to do to strengthen those lintels or lattices, whatever you want to call them, is to add plating material. Plating material being sheet metal attached onto the sides of these lintels by using tech screws. Within the properties of these plating materials, right there on those three dots, we can go and introduce our own default settings for these platings. With the code is basically something you're going to be using to recall that plating that you'll be adding onto that lintel. Now we'll refer back to this again later in the tutorial as well. I will be guiding through how it works right now and get back to it again later with this same type of scenario. Now introducing any code that you'll be using from the engineer to specify that plating, you can introduce the code right there, the weight of the kilogram per meter, and the depth, meaning the height from the bottom part of the lintel to the top, the connection type you can use right there, and the location of the fixing. Okay, so we can use a code there, for example's sake, if it was introduced as the height by the steel thickness or the tensile strength in that sense, where we'd be using, for example's sake, a G550. And we can introduce the weight there. I'm not too sure what the weight would be depending on what thickness of steel you're using. You can introduce the weight there. You can introduce the depth of the plating material right there, the connection method, your location right there as well. And we can go click OK and click OK. So when we introduce an opening like this, a window or a door, in this case we've got a window, and we would like to manually insert our plating material right there. We've got a button in 3D which we'll be using called Create Plate, and we can recall that default setting that we've placed from that code. And we'll click OK, and it will insert that plating material right there. Now, do keep in mind you do have the ability to control the height of this plate by going into the properties. So if we go back to our properties right there and change the height within that setting that we've already changed there, we can go and control, select on this side, and we'll insert the plate right there. So you'll see it does have an ability to change the height of a manually inserted plate. When we go to the automatically inserted plate, it is just part of settings, which we will discuss at a later point. Now, initially the L headers are exactly the same as our plating. They do have a different method of connection in a sense where it is bent flat on the top end, calling it an L plate, rather than calling it just plating. As you can see on this picture right there, it is displaying how it is being bent across on the top plate of your wall panel. As we introduce the bracing and strapping, it is also exactly the same principle where you have the ability to go insert code for these strapping or bracing materials and introduce the weight per meter. You can change the depth if you need to, connection and the location as well. We click OK, and this will then affect your settings. Introducing it into a frame like this would be quite simple, just like introducing your plating. We've got a couple of options like the strapping and bracing options right there. So we'll discuss these tools at a later stage into more detail. As we go there, we can see we can bring up the code and draw in a cross bracing like this. We have the ability to do a single diagonal brace vertical brace or horizontal bracing as well, which will be discussed later in the tutorial. Introducing your bucking onto your opening itself is generally considered being a finishing material on the outside of your window itself. As you can see on this picture right there, so if you need to introduce your bucking material on your design, please make sure to change the settings to your requirements. You can also access these plate properties not just by clicking on those three dots on the right hand side, but also by clicking on the plate properties button. After you've completed all of the required settings right there, you can just head on to the OK button and those changes would take effect as of then.